Our guest today is Miss Susan Lindner. Susan is the founder and CEO of Innovation Storytellers, a leading innovation storytelling consulting firm. She draws from her initial experience as an anthropologist and international aid worker in rural Thailand in the 1990s, where she shared stories that helped at-risk populations disproportionately affected by AIDS to slow the virus's spread. Today, as a 20-year communications expert, she is committed to using those same storytelling skills to inspire innovation leaders everywhere to become incredible storytellers and ensure that their innovations get the resources, runway, and recognition they deserve. Susan is a highly sought after keynote speaker, workshop leader, messaging strategist, storytelling coach, and the world's leading expert on innovation storytelling. She speaks at global conferences, consulates, and trade organizations, having spoken to over 700 companies from 89 countries through 250 plus speaking events with 250,000 plus attendees. She has also worked with C-level leaders and teams from over 60 countries at Fortune 100 companies like GE, Corning, Citi, AT&T, and Arm & Hammer on their innovation storytelling strategies. The result? Those innovation leaders become incredible storytellers who go on to change the world. Susan is driven to ensure that every breakthrough idea reaches its finish line through powerful stories that connect to every listener and power that brilliant idea forward. Susan is also the host of Innovation Storytellers, a weekly podcast that takes the mystery of how to communicate breakthrough ideas to the people who matter most. Every week, Susan interviews top global innovation leaders from companies like Amazon, Bloomberg, Cisco, Corning, and Tesla about the stories that have moved their innovations past the boardroom, lab, and production line and into our everyday lives. Susan holds degrees from Dixon College in anthropology and comparative religion and from University of Costa Rica in cultural anthropology and liberation theology. She is based in New York City. Today, Susan is going to be talking to us about innovation storytelling, how to bridge divides, and win support for your breakthrough ideas. This is important to all of us because as innovation leaders, we're always under pressure to create new market opportunities for our organizations, and so we need the support of others in those organizations to help champion our efforts. Consequently, we need to communicate our breakthrough ideas in a way that is easily understood by C-suite executives, shareholders, and other stakeholders. Susan is going to show us how to overcome these barriers to innovation, as well as resistance to change, by using the innovation storytelling method to create organizational alignment with our work. This includes how to tell better stories that engage and align key stakeholders, get audiences on board with our vision, and deliver maximum impact for our organization. And so with that, I turn it over now to Susan. Please join me, if you will, in welcoming Miss Susan Lindner. Susan, the floor is all yours.
Oh, Anthony, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. So glad you recently joined the board of advisors at the Global Innovation Institute. I think the work that you're doing is so important, making all of us better innovators every day and helping us create better organizations in the process as well. So thank you so much for allowing me to join this incredible membership.
My pleasure.
So I'm going to get started with a little story of my own. In today's conversation, I want to start off with an experience I had working with Corning Glass. Now, Corning is the largest glass manufacturer in the world. If you look at your cell phone right now, that's Gorilla Glass, and that is the glass that has permeated pretty much all of our pockets for the last 20 years. I had the opportunity to work with a group of fractographers. Can you just give me a yes in the comments if you've ever met a fractographer before? Because I had never met one. This was a group of scientists who do the heavy lifting to determine how glass breaks. And in a manufacturing organization like Corning, that's a really important job. These are the folks who figure out whether or not when your head hits the windshield, whether that windshield will bend, whether it will pop out, or whether it will break into 1,000 rounded pieces so you don't get glass in you after that accident. Well, this team had decided they were going to pitch a new windshield to the CEO of Corning Glass. And I said, great, show me the pitch deck. It was 59 pages long. And it started with not one, but two of these beautiful electron models of sand. I don't know if there is truly a more boring way to open a presentation, but this might be it. Clearly, the CEO of Corning Glass has a PhD in chemistry himself. He's no stranger to tough chemical equations, but his focus is on emerging markets and China and today's stock price. He is not focused on figuring out this chemistry equation. Well, in the middle of this conversation, one of the fractographers, Amy, became an aunt. Her sister in Ohio, here in the United States, had a baby. And we stopped for a minute and she passed around her phone and we looked at that beautiful baby and ooh and ahhed for a while. And then we got back to that really boring diagram of sand. And I said, Amy, can you show me that picture of your new niece one more time? And I said, guys, look at that baby. I go, imagine all those tiny little motor neurons that are firing off right now. And imagine what that tiny little pancreas is doing and all of those crazy little capillaries that are running through its body right now, just pumping out blood. Huh. And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. And then they stopped for a moment and said, we're getting a little too granular with the story, aren't we? And I said, yes. And that's possibly the worst sand joke that I have ever heard. But here's the truth of the matter. When we are telling an innovation story, oftentimes we get way too granular. We get way too fixated on the features and benefits of whatever it is that we're working on, and we completely forget about the bigger picture. The other danger is that we zoom out and we tell everyone that this innovation is about to change the world, and the same yawns wind up happening. And so I want to let everyone on this call know that you have an opportunity to become an innovation storyteller just like I did. It certainly was not my first calling. In fact, the last job I had before getting into this line of work was as an epidemiologist for the Centers for Disease Control, tracking variant and resistant strains of HIV coming into the United States back in the late 90s. That was the job that I had left to pursue innovation storytelling. Prior to that, though, I was an anthropologist, studying at the University of Costa Rica and traveling through Central America. I hitchhiked through 5 countries and 2 war zones to do that work. And in the end, I decided I wanted to apply my talents in a different direction. And I went to go live in Thailand. And I worked with Thai and Hill tribe populations to help try to stop the spread of HIV there. And it was there that I discovered how powerful storytelling could be. Now, when I first got to Thailand, this is what confronted me. It was 1994. I had come to northern Thailand to a rural rice farming village, and these were the billboards I saw everywhere. I don't know if there are any Thai speakers on the call, but I'll let you know this essentially says, get AIDS and die. It was intended to terrify people. 1 in 6 sexually active people where I lived was HIV positive at the time. And there are 3 AIDS deaths per day where I was living. So the epidemic was rampant and it was intense. This campaign, this shock and awe campaign using fear as its centerpiece, I'm curious what you think. Give me a Y or an N in the comments. I want to know if you think a campaign like this to stop the spread of HIV was effective. If a fear campaign around the villages where I lived might be effective in slowing the spread of HIV. Does fear work when trying to slow a terrifying, deadly disease? Not effective. Nope. Give me a Y or an N. I'm curious if you think this worked. A yes or a no. Well, I will let you know that this campaign was highly effective. In fact, we saw really important and rapid drops in the spread of HIV for 6 months after this terrifying billboard campaign. By the way, if you didn't know, this guy is a hungry ghost who will terrify your family in the event that you contract HIV. This campaign was so effective that as marketers, when we find something that works and a story that works, what do? We tell an even scarier story. And those are billboards that I can't even show you. They were so horrific. But for a while, for another 6 months, that fear campaign worked too. But in the end, fear is an emotion that doesn't last very long. And we saw HIV infection rates climb again. So, unlike all of us who are working on breakthrough technologies or brand new ideas, trying to move new business models and processes around, I only had one innovation at my disposal, and that was the condom. I was assigned to work in brothels all over northern Thailand, convincing sex workers and their customers to use a condom every time they had sex. So, this conversation is adult and important, but also it's about innovation. I'm curious what you think. How old, if you could put it in the comments, how old do you think the condom is? How old do you think this breakthrough innovation is? The only tool that I had to stop the spread of HIV in the villages where I was working, how old do you think this tool was? If you had to guess, how old is this innovation tool that I had at my disposal? 50 years, 100 years, 200 years? Roman times, that's a really good guess. 75 years? How old would you say? What would be your guess? I will tell you that archaeological evidence tells us that the condom has been with us as long as the Egyptians built the pyramids. In fact, there's archaeological evidence directly to that point. It has been with us for a very long time. Doesn't seem that comfortable, but we're talking in the 10,000 year time frame. Archaeological evidence in the caves of France, as well as in Egypt. So I had three core audiences for which I could use my breakthrough innovation. I talked to those women who owned brothels. They were called mamasans, and they were the owners of these brothels. I also had to work directly with the customers themselves, and finally with the sex workers. So each one of my target audiences for my innovation, a 10,000-year-old innovation, had different needs. The mama-san was clearly looking to make a profit. The customer was looking for a great Saturday night, and the sex workers, when we asked them why they were working there, they said survival. Survival. And so we needed to find a different way to tell the story about fighting HIV when these sex workers were seeing between 6 and 8 customers per night. So it was urgent, it was important, and in fact, this disease was life-threatening. These were life or death innovation decisions with a story that needed to change because the shock and awe and the fear were not enough. And so we needed to tell a different story that placed the listener as the hero of the story. And we asked this very important question. What if you were the hero of your own story? Ask yourself, listener, what if I am the hero of my own story? And I want to pause for a minute and ask you to think about the audiences that you're trying to sell your innovation to. Maybe it's the CEO, the CFO, the CTO. Maybe it's the engineering team that you need them to build a prototype. Maybe it's a government official. Stop for a moment and ask yourself, what would it take to make my listener the hero of this story if the innovation served their need first, not mine as the creator or the bringer of the breakthrough, but of their need? And so we wound up finding when we asked this question, and this is part of an anthropological process called appreciative inquiry. And when we asked the mama-san, what if you were the hero of this story? She said, I would want to have the reputation for the cleanest brothel in town. And the customer said, I want to be able to make sure that I can protect my wife and future children from HIV. And finally, the sex worker said, I want to be in control of my own destiny. That would make me the hero of this story. And I just thought to myself, I'm a humble aid worker. I'm a public health messenger. What do I know about making someone's life better by creating a better destiny for them or helping them to create a better destiny for themselves? And so we realized that we needed to come up with a better solution. And that solution was this girl from New York City. We began putting together entrepreneurial programs, chicken raising, duck raising, pig raising, as alternatives to prostitution. In addition, I lived in the Golden Triangle region. This is a home of rubies and sapphires and emeralds. And so we taught former sex workers to become amazing gem cutters and stone cutters so that they could have additional skill sets. We also taught computer skills and business skills and secretarial skills to bring new technologies and new ideas into the space. And as a result, we dropped new HIV infection rates dramatically. This program wound up being duplicated and scaled across 10 different provinces around northern Thailand. So why am I sharing with you all of this conversation about HIV, sex work, and entrepreneurship in rural Thailand? It's because too often, even when we have an innovation that's breakthrough, and I certainly didn't have that, we are leaving too much on the table by not thinking about the story that we're telling that actually moves people into action. And unless we take that question as a life and death one, then we are going to miss out on the opportunity to build momentum and movement around our breakthrough. So let's talk a little bit about how this theory came to be. I think of the prophets, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Moses, all of them, whether you are a believer or not, as some of the greatest viral storytellers of all time. What do I mean by that? A great storyteller is one who gets other people to tell the story for them. In fact, as innovators, we cannot create a good enough innovation story that only can be told by us. And if that is the case, the innovation dies. In all of our complex organizations, we know that we cannot do it alone. And in fact, none of the prophets did it alone. It's one of my great dreams is to dispel the idea of one brilliant thinker who changes the world. It's one brilliant thinker who gets 10 to 40 friends to follow along who will spread the word on the prophet's behalf. So as you stop for a moment and think about the innovation that you are working on, and I'm going to anoint all of you prophets today for the moment, innovation prophets in your own right, think about who are your early adopters? Who are those people who will carry the message for you? Because it's the reason why their stories are still being told 5,000, 2,000, 3,000 years later. We're still telling their stories long after they're gone. And a great innovation story has to have those elements built into it. And we're going to talk about some of those today. So I want to take a step back into the science of storytelling. And frankly, as innovators, so many of us grew up on the science side of campus, right? We grew up studying engineering, technology, computer science, chemistry, physics, biology, whatever it may be. We often spent a lot of time on the technical side of life. And as a result, we missed out on learning about the science of storytelling that happened on the humanities side of campus. The reality is the human brain is not built for Excel spreadsheets and not even this PowerPoint. Our brain is built on story. It is the SOS, the story operating system of the human body. We have been living telling stories long before the written word, and that's how societies survived. So if we try to use different methodology from our own operating system, we will fail. We have to get good at this skill. And frankly, Stanford has already done the research for us. They found that stories are 22 times more memorable than facts alone. And in fact, they determined that just facts in a meeting will produce really poor results. In fact, most people forget everything they heard about those statistics that you cultivated so heavily in your Excel spreadsheets within 6 minutes of leaving the meeting. which is probably why we're having so many meetings about the same things over and over again. Stories are amazing because I think of them as your greatest productivity tool. They're the things that are helping you build muscle memory in the activities that you want other people to do on behalf of your innovation. So think about storytelling as a way to people to hold on to information and internalize it so that your story keeps spreading, that your brilliant ideas keep moving through the organization. Now, many of you have probably seen this movie. In fact, I'm really curious if you don't mind. I know we have such a global audience on this call, which is why I love all things Global Innovation Institute. But I'm curious, how many of you are familiar with this movie Inside Out? You might have seen it, you might have loved it on your own, or you might have seen it with your own kids. But as it turns out, the science around storytelling is about the emotion. So it is the feelings that make the story stick to the body. And somehow we all got served a notice when we went to our first job that as professionals, we had to leave our emotions at the door, when in reality, it's emotion that gets people to act. So, how many of us have had the experience of watching a scary movie and our palms are sweating and our heart is racing fast? Hollywood knows how to do this instinctively. They know how to make us have a physical experience of a story, even though we're staring at a fiction. We still walk away with our hearts beating out of our chest when we leave the theater. And that is what compels us to talk to our neighbor about, oh my God, I just saw the scariest movie. Emotions are the driver. In fact, it's a neurological chemical that's being released in our bodies every time we feel that fear, joy, excitement. And look at the stories that really intrigue us, right? Every James Bond movie starts off with James Bond running across the screen to God knows where, or maybe Tom Cruise running away from someone. We don't even know what's happening, and already our hearts are elevated, right? That adrenaline rush takes us from just from minute one in every action adventure movie. It's what we come for. It's to feel more feelings. So I had an experience that I want to share with you. I was applying for the lovely job of stepmother of the year. I had married a man with 2 small children. He was a widower. And so I decided that I was going to make a movie night. I went upstairs and I baked a batch of fresh, warm chocolate chip cookies. And I brought down a pitcher of milk and glasses. And when I got downstairs, my kids had already started the movie. I chose Bambi. Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the very first scene in Bambi, but Bambi's mother gets shot and killed right at the beginning of the movie. And my 2 little lovelies, my little kids, had lost their mommy when they were 2 and 4. And I watched the look on my kids' faces when they saw the opening scene to this movie. It was horrific, the horror that just washed over them. And I was mortified. I was so upset. And I thought, oh, that Walt Disney, I can't stand him. You'll notice almost every Disney movie has a mom or a dad that's missing from the story. The kids are orphans, or the kids maybe only have one parent. And that's because even Walt Disney knew that to capture the mind of a child, you have to start, in some cases, with the scariest scenario, and then he has you. I say all this to say, are we really even thinking about the next meeting agenda, the next PowerPoint presentation we're putting together? Are you stopping for a moment and thinking about what your audience is feeling around your innovation, the new story you're about to tell them? And have you decided how to plan it? Now, I'm not advocating for you to put terror into the hearts of your audience, but emotions are what enable us to connect both with the innovation and the people around us who are going to enact that innovation. And that's because our brains, this storytelling operating system, is firing off these neurotransmitters. So you get to decide when you are planning your next story, which one of these neurotransmitters you want to unleash. Is it GABA to relax people and say, I know this new AI rollout is coming and we're bringing on a new tool? It sounds a little terrifying, but let me show you a picture of what the future is going to look like when we're done here. Are you trying to invoke more learning or more mood regulation in the room? We just had a big group of layoffs, but it's time to buckle down and get serious about what's coming next. Let's talk about what a better future is going to look like. Your job, actually, as the storyteller, is to determine which one of those neurochemicals, just like every Hollywood director, plans on unleashing on their audience. I will tell you, though, there's one story that makes all the difference in the world, and that is the goodwill story. The goodwill story answers the question, this is how can I make your life better? How can I make your life better? That's a goodwill story. So stop yourself for a moment and ask, as you're thinking about the innovation your portfolio you're working on right now, do you have a really good story for each one of these innovation and how it's going to make your audience, not necessarily your customer, because you have lots of stage gates along the way, but how is it going to make your audience members' life better? A goodwill story is so unique. When you frame innovation in a way that's about to make other people's lives better, what you find is reduced stress. And by the way, every innovation conversation starts off with fear. We all hate change, except for a very small percentage of the population, which is probably all of us on this call. But you have the opportunity, when you tell a goodwill story, to reduce the stress around your innovation, to create greater reward. I feel like I'm getting something in return for the innovation. And the last is greater caregiving. So this last one is kind of curious. It's really interesting what story does when it's done right. Caregiving today is, or I should say in ancient times, is eat this mushroom, it's delicious. Don't eat this mushroom, it'll kill you. And this other mushroom over here, maybe save for Saturday night. But maybe today, our modern day example of that is the Amazon review. I love this product. It worked fantastically. Definitely don't buy it. It's way cheaper than what it looks like in the picture. And maybe try this other new thing that you've never tried before. That's caregiving activity. Why do we even bother writing reviews? Why do we care whether or not the next person in line wants to buy a fan, or the best reviews on Amazon are for milk? If you have the chance and you want to do something fun over your lunch break, take a look at the Amazon reviews for milk. They're hysterical. It's because we actually want to help each other with the cool new thing. And if you can pre-program your stories for greater caregiving, you create virality. And every innovation story needs that level of virality. We need other people to tell the story. And in fact, among millennials, which is now the biggest portion of our working population, millennials, at least here in the United States, millennials are, when they share your story, innovators, they're coming from their mouths. It's more influential, more memorable, and more trustworthy. So it's actually not enough that we're just telling these stories from our own mouths. We need other people to share them. And I'll tell you one other thing. An innovation story is different from all other stories. Your job is to make the listener the hero. And that means context before content. Can you get really clear about where the audience member is right now, and that you're adapting your story to them? Whether it's the CTO, the CFO, the CEO, the engineering team, the R&D team, even legal and compliance, what matters to them? Now, the best way to do that is with an empathy map. And I'm going to be sharing this empathy map with you at the end of the conversation. I'll give you a QR code where I'm going to give you all of this in workbook form for you to take home with you to use at your desks every day. But empathy mapping is part of design thinking. And the idea is to center the listener in this story. All of these questions, what is my listener thinking and feeling? What are they hearing from other people they care about? What are they seeing in the competitive environment? And what are they actually saying and doing around the office? Really important. But these last two questions, the pain and the gain, what are their fears, frustrations, and obstacles? And what do they hope to get out of it? Are the two big questions that need to be asked. So these are questions for all of you. what is the pain my listener is experiencing now? What gain will your audience get from the innovation? And this last one is a bonus question. What agony will they experience if they actually say yes to your idea? What agony will they experience if they say yes? Are they going to have to devote more budget, take time off of the things that they're actually getting KPI'd on at the moment? What will this derail them from? Or how hard is the engineering challenge? If you can share that honestly with them, it's not easy to get an innovation out the door, but you will win allies in the process if you're honest about it. So, a great innovation starts with you asking yourself the big four questions. What do you want your listener to think, to feel, to do, and to say when you are done speaking? Once you've left the room, imagine the CEO coming up to one of the attendees of your meeting where you are pitching the new innovation. And he says, "Hey, I missed that meeting. What was that meeting about?" Can you pre-program your story so that they have the exact words to say, "We saw the most brilliant innovation. I can't wait to tell you about it." Because that's what our PowerPoints and so forth need to be doing. Our meeting agendas need to be doing for us when we're there. In fact, I don't create any PowerPoint presentation without asking myself, what emotion needs to show up on every slide in the presentation? How do I want my listener to feel at every step? So I want to introduce you now to the Great Eight. These are the 8 steps to innovation storytelling and the workbook that I'm going to be giving you to do this innovation storytelling on your own. It starts off with the first is creating a shared history. That's step 1. So how do we do that? A shared history is about looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly of where we all come from, innovations that we've worked on together that have failed, parts of the industry that we know are really tough or going through big changes right now, and even the successes that we've had together. Like, remember that product launch we did 3 years ago? That was amazing. Where can you find shared history? Because any innovation story requires trust in order for it to move forward. So how can you and your listener talk about, even before the slides come up, what is the shared history you have together? And a reminder that we tend to bond more over the tragedy than the triumph. So don't be afraid to share some of the losses that you've had in the past here as well. Step 2 is probably the most important step in the process, which is called owning the shift. Now, when you're telling an innovation story, you're bringing up something new, and it must answer the question, why this, why now? Why this, why now? Why are you introducing this thing at this moment in time? And typically, there are 2 major things that impact a shift. There's a change happening in the world that is either macro or micro. A macro shift, those are things that we do not control. So the advent of AI, new regulations that are taking place in our industry. It's new policies like return to office after COVID, or big changes in workplace strategy. Like all of these things that are taking place, even climate change, right? Things that are impacting our business and our customers' reality that we have no control over, but we need to address. The other are micro shifts. And micro shifts are things that are happening inside the company. So change in leadership, change in strategy, new markets opening, big layoffs happening, new AI strategies that are being rolled out, even new seemingly disruptive competitors on the scene. Those are the shifts. And in your storytelling, I really encourage you to use headlines and other evidence of what's going on from the outside world to prove to your listeners that there's a shift happening. Your job is to get heads wagging around the table that says, yes, I see this change is happening in the world right now, and we cannot look away from it. Now, the other side of the shift is, on either side of the shift, rather, there will be winners and losers. Your job is to convince your audience that standing still will kill us. and that winning is about taking a new direction to address the shift. And that is where your innovation comes in. But the goal is to set up an absolutely airtight case that the world requires that we look at this new thing, this shift, and we must address it. And of course, it's with your innovation. So oftentimes that big step into the shift is terrifying. And so we use a process called breadcrumbing, like Hansel and Gretel in that old fable of leaving breadcrumbs behind to see how far we've come and to find our way to someplace new. So breadcrumbing is about helping people to understand they have already done tremendous shifting in their careers, watching innovation around them, right? So we have seen a trajectory of, let's say, how software got sold over the decades, right? Whether it was a transactional sale as products, whether software got sold to us with a consultant in the 90s, or whether with the advent of the iPhone and DIY software, as an example, became customer-centric, and we could all manage our software on our own. Today, software is a relationship. Who would have thought 20 years ago that we would be buying television on a monthly basis, or pet toys, or diapers? Today, we're living in a relationship-centric economy, right? So this example, just one of many, right, about software as an example of how it gets sold, is showing you a trajectory of how we've changed over time. Think about how companies and organizations have changed to adapt to a relationship-centric model today, where we have changed our business models from transactional to SaaS. We have changed our people and who's in charge and how companies are structured and sold. And we have changed dollars, the resources that have gone into making new business models. So breadcrumbing is an opportunity to help our listener look backward and see how far they've come, how they've evolved over time, so that they can make the step into the future. Step 4 in innovation storytelling is what I like to call show them heaven. And it starts with a sentence of imagine if. This is your job now, storytellers and prophets, is to show them what heaven looks like, what the future looks like when your innovation is here. Most importantly, it's a moment to stop and ask the listener, what would heaven look like if we could solve the problem that you're facing today with our innovation? What would it look like for you? So you might hear all different kinds of answers based on what you originally plotted in your empathy map. But showing them heaven is an opportunity to stop for a moment in your pitch and say, if we could solve these challenges, what would heaven look like? And it's an opportunity to co-create a better future based on your innovation. And we all know getting into heaven is not the easiest task. It's a hard one. We have to be pretty good to get there. But getting someone to the promised land is about helping them take the next right step. And that's the question we leave them on step 4 is what would be the next right step we need to take in order to get one step closer to that future that our listener is imagining? What would that look like? And so then and only then, when we have that clear picture and they're ready to take the step into the future, do we actually introduce the innovation that we want to bring to the company or to our listener. So step 5 is where we actually bring out the demo, the narrative, the features, the benefits, and we tailor that conversation to what we learned in the empathy map. We tailor it to the things that matter most to this audience. So naturally, the story for the CTO, the CFO, the CEO, they're all going to have their different chapters of this story. And they're going to have different flavors because we tailor a story to the audience. The story is not tailored to the innovation. The story is tailored to the audience. So you might ask, what if I have all 3 of those members in a meeting when I'm pitching my innovation? And chances are you will. The goal is to make sure that you provide space for messages targeted at each of them. So I know, Mr. CTO, you're thinking this is way too technically complicated to build, but actually we've been working with the engineering team to design a much simpler framework than what we've done in the past. Actually, Mr. CFO, let me tell you where this is coming from, the line item in the budget, and how we're actually going to reduce costs on current production. So it's incumbent upon you to make sure that the needs of your listener are being addressed when you bring out the magic tools, when you bring out your innovation. Number 6 is really important. As I mentioned, the prophets never did it alone, and neither should you. So think about in your presentations, who are third parties or even interested parties inside of the organization that you can cite who are already on board with the big idea? Who are those adopters and allies? And what I'm looking for in the presentation are 3 sentences from 3 different people with their pictures, their names, their titles, and sentences that sound like, where has this been all of our lives? We've been waiting, and I'm so glad it's here. Or, please don't take this away from me. It has changed how I work every day, and it's made my life better. And the last is, I can't wait to share this with other people. This is a game changer, and we've seen dramatic increases in productivity, profit, etc. So in the event that your product is so new and breakthrough, you don't have any third parties that have ever used this before, go back to the data from analysts and academics and even industry research that says this is what the market is craving. Look for those spaces where you can get third-party validation, because I've never been in an innovation meeting where everybody is on board right from jump. There are so many skeptics that we need to appease. Step 7 is about finding the obstacles, and you want to get to know. You actually want to hear the no's and collect them. Make sure someone on your team is hearing all the objections in the room, because for each time you go back and repeat this process with other audiences, you want to begin to incorporate answers to the obstacles while you're pitching. While you're pitching. Say, I know you're thinking that this definitely couldn't work, but let me tell you the work we've done to make sure that it does. I know you're thinking this is going to be too costly, too time consuming, not competitive enough. Let me tell you why we've already thought about those issues and addressed them. The more you can head off the objections at the pass and ask your team to sit down and make the most grueling Q&A that you can imagine, you'll begin to tell a fuller, richer story about the why you know it's going to work, not just raising them and saying, yeah, we've thought of that. And you'll notice that in this slide, this is a picture of 2 hikers walking this path together, because no one on the receiving end of your story should feel like they have to adopt this innovation on their own. How can you convey to them that you'll be there with them as their Sherpa getting up this mountain together? And that's why this last piece is so important. It's the last slide of the Great 8 storytelling format, and that's the win-win. Your job is to remind people that if they decide to take up this innovation, if they decide to move forward with it, both of you will win, that there's winning in it all around, and it's ongoing. It's a really big risk, as we all know, in all of our organizations, for someone, especially late stage career, who has to say yes to $1 million proposition on something that may or may not work. It's a huge reputational risk. It's a huge financial risk. Your job is to figure out what is the short and long-term win-win for your audience in this story. It's the spoonful of sugar with the medicine of innovation that makes it all work. So if you want to take a screenshot of this, you certainly can. But I want to make sure that you have all of this in one spot. So I'll give you that in just a second. I do want to come back to my friends on the innovation side at Corning, and I want to tell you what that story looked like when we were finished. So in the end, we did away with that 59-page slide deck, and we created an 11-page slide deck that began with, imagine being stuck in traffic on the highway after a long day of work and getting into your self-driving Tesla. Imagine taking your 45-inch flat screen television And that kind of entertainment center replacing your windshield. You lean back and relax and open the second half of Avatar that you left on your television at home from the night before, or you pull up the last 3 emails in your drafts folder right from your windshield. A keyboard pops out of your dashboard, and now your self-driving Tesla has turned into your own personal entertainment and productivity center. That's the kind of breakthrough we're talking about with the new windshield for this Tesla that's going to be announced in 2020, because Tesla's never hit a deadline for. So that's the way we started this pitch to the CEO, and it went fantastically well. So there's a way of starting a story around your innovation that is much bigger, and you'll notice just 4 sentences to start off a great presentation. So I want to give this gift to you of story and give you the workbook to help you tell all of your stories in the future. Feel free to scan this QR code. It also includes a survey that I can give back to the Global Innovation Institute and Anthony so that he can see whether you like this presentation, if you didn't like this presentation. And if you didn't, by the way, no problem. Feel free to get up and grab a cup of coffee right now and come back for our Q&A, or go ahead and fill out the survey and let us know how you feel. If this was valuable to you, I would love to give you this gift back. And we'll just take a minute to go ahead and fill that out. And feel free to put questions in the chat, right, Anthony?
That's right. Yes. If you have questions or comments, feel free to put them in the chat here, and we will be happy to have Susan address them. And whatever experiences you have, I'm sure she'll be happy to address them. And also make sure you scan the QR code there for that as well. We have, of course, recorded this, and we'll be distributing notification of that as well afterwards. So we'll start it off. Brian here mentioned that is an important point. I think I wanted to sort of springboard off of and maybe have Susan comment on. He said his business partner got the obstacles to his new innovation, which required a $10 million investment from the board. Before the meeting, he saw every board member 30 days before their presentation and asked them what reservations I might have. He got the $10 million. So, this kind of goes back, first of all, Susan, what you're talking about, doing the empathy map. Sometimes we also talk about the whiff on what's in it for me, which is the same question,
Mm-hmm.
And the important point is, a lot of times when you're pitching this, and you mentioned this too, you're going to have more than one stakeholder. You're going to have a CEO, a CTO, a chief innovation officer, a chief strategy officer, chief finance officer. That's a big one. And so I want you to comment on this. I think it's important to kind of get to know each one of them and know what their reservations and fears and obstacles are. And then I guess part of my question for you, Susan, is, are we trying to cover all of those at once? Or are we trying to do custom presentations? Or what's your best advice and experience there?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we have the luxury of having individual meetings and really doing the deep dive. And sometimes we don't, right? They're just like, we're going to have a board meeting. Great. But that homework beforehand is so important. And I think the empathy map is a very easy 1-page tool. Before I ever give a pitch, I find out who I'm going to be on the call with. And I try to do a little homework, even if it's LinkedIn, even if it's a quick media search, just to find out what matters to them. And I would expect, in any meeting I go into, that I'm going to be the one taking notes and so forth. But if someone wants to meet with me, that they should do a little homework and see what matters to them. So are you reviewing budgets? If you can't meet with the person personally, are you reviewing budgets? Are you looking at what the product roadmap is for the CTO and know what's coming next and where your innovation could fit in strategically? Are you looking at the corporate strategic goals? Are you looking at revenue goals and targets? Like, each of those things really mattered, and it shows that you've done the homework before you step into the room. Now, most of our listeners, correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony, they're corporate innovators, right?
Corporate and government organizations.
And government, right. So as a former, New York City public health worker, and I was on a grant from the Centers for Disease Control, the biggest research institute here in the United States, all government focused. We had lots of government minders, right, that we had to be respectful and answer to as we wanted our study to progress, expand, and get more funding. So even thinking about what are the goals, whether you're in Saudi Arabia and you have 2030 goals to consider, right? Or maybe you have annual goals or annual budgets or even upcoming elections and thinking about new people who are going to be coming in, take that empathy map and really just sit for a moment and map out each person who's going to be in a meeting. If you do it on the back of an envelope and it takes you 5 minutes, at a minimum, it will trigger new ideas about what is the agony that my listener is experiencing and how can I help them? And by the way, I've heard some crazy answers to these stories. I was working with a cybersecurity team, and they told me we have alarms going off all weekend long of false positives from some of my security technology. All I want is a weekend without having to come to the office. Someone else told me I would like to take our whole 10 days vacation in America, 10 whole days. I would like to be able to take them back to back. Will your innovation help me do that? So that I'm getting enough productivity, that I'm getting enough revenue in, that I could actually take a vacation with my family. Or even, I just want to be able to leave the office by 5, or I want a raise or a promotion. Is your software so good that it's going to change the trajectory of my career personally? Sometimes we have really egotistical goals in the room, right? And that's okay. I'm not shaming anyone for their goals, but does the story align with what my listener needs?
That's right. And that's an important point. I mean, you kind of have to be very objective about it. There's no judgment about what different stakeholders' goals are. They are what
Mm-hmm.
they are for whatever reason. There's no judgment about that. But as innovation storytellers, I mean, our job is to understand what those motivations are, what the pains they have, what gains they need, what's going to really move them. And then I think I love your 8-step innovation storytelling method. It's a beautiful structure. But understanding those points, those empathy points of our stakeholders, then how do I frame that whole thing in this story? And I think to me personally, the aha moment is show me heaven, right? Actually, I used to have a pastor. He would say, "What would it look like if?" And then he would engage our imagination. What would the world look like if this scenario were to play, right? And so that was always a wake up moment for me, that inspirational moment, like because it engages our imagination to see heaven, to see that new reality. And I think if we can get those stakeholders over the bridge to that point, and then we work through the obstacles and everything, like you mentioned, I think we can get them to give us their support and so forth. So any follow on to that, but I just 100% agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and it also gives your story a space to breathe and allow another voice in, right? That's what the prophets did. They
Hmm.
told us one thing, and then we made the stories our own. Whether
Hmm.
you're a believer or not, the prophets were so adept at telling a story and then said, now you tell it from your experience. And
Hmm.
that imagine if slide, step 4, is a pause for you as the prophet to say, let me have my converts to my brilliant idea stop and envision what their life would look like if the AI tool really worked, if I really got that coding done in half the time, if I could find a way to communicate more effectively with the people around me, how would my life change, right? How would I be saved? Um,
Right. And
right.
and I think I like your point too about making them the hero of the story. That's if we can get our the people we're trying to convince, if we can get them to be the hero of the story, that's many steps in the right direction as well. I
Mhm.
wanted to touch on a few comments here too. I mean, a lot of thank yous. Thank you for the excellent talk. Very interesting information. Barbara said she often recommends your podcast. They want to grow their storytelling skills in business.
Aw, thank
Thank
you.
you, Barbara. Yeah. And so Brian, who's actually he's on our board of advisors too, and he's written a book recently about different political leaders. He wanted to know who do you let me what is his question? Who do you think is the best storyteller in politics today?
That's a really great question. I just posted this yesterday. I think the greatest modern storyteller today, and maybe a little less well known outside of the United States, is a man named Brian Stevenson. And Brian Stevenson is an advocate around civil rights. He built a museum in Alabama about the slavery to prison pipeline, and is also has had death row convictions overturned at the Supreme Court. And he is the most, I think, erudite, storyteller about civil rights in the United States today. If you ever have the chance to um, read anything that he's written, I guarantee you will be blown away. Brian Stevenson. If we look at the political sphere here in the United States, I mean, just watching President Obama at his presidential library opening, I would actually say it's Michelle Obama, who's one of the better political orators today. James Tallarico in Texas is an incredible guy who speaks very well.
Very
Yeah, those are some of my favorites.
interesting. Very interesting. A lot of people are asking for the link to your podcast. Are you able to type that into the
Oh,
chat?
absolutely. I would love to. It's Innovation Storytellers. And you can check out, we just hit our 5-year anniversary, 250 episodes, all chief innovation officers and thinkers in the innovation space. Anthony, of course, has been on the show. He was an amazing guest. And I'm always looking for great guests for the show. So if you are in a large organization and you are working on a phenomenal innovation, I would love to talk to you. I would love for my guests to get to know you as well.
Yes,
My
yes. Yeah, if any of you have incredible experiences where you've used innovation storytelling, reach out to Susan because I'm sure she'd love to hear your stories there and your experiences and share that with her audience as well. So,
Mm.
last invitation for any last questions here. We're coming up on the top of the hour. If there's any other questions or comments you want to share, feel free to put them in the chat. And I just want to say thank you so much, Susan. I'm going to put you on the spot too. So let's all cheer for Susan to finish a book on innovation storytelling.
I've been working on it for a while.
Yeah, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Sorry, but I am so eager to see a book come out from Susan Lindner on innovation storytelling and methodologies and all. So I'm just going to encourage you that way to do that, and I'll be happy the day it does happen. So, but thank you so much for your time and insights and your brilliant experiences around the world. It's just an honor and pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And to all of you, and I please encourage you to keep telling your stories because the world needs to hear them. And if I can be of assistance in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out on LinkedIn or through the Institute. I'm here for it.
All right. So thank you, Susan, and thank you everyone for being a part of our webinar today. With that, we'll wrap it up and we'll see you next time. Thank you for your participation and have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.